Con las manos temblorosas, Tiago ató a la cría de lince al árbol, sabiendo que su acto desesperado atraería a los lobos que necesitaba capturar para salvar a su hija. Cuando la manada finalmente emergió de la oscuridad del bosque, sus colmillos brillando bajo la luz de la luna, el alfa hizo algo que desafió todo lo que Tiago creía saber sobre la naturaleza salvaje. Antes de continuar, no olvides suscribirte al canal, darle like al video y comentar desde qué parte del mundo nos estás viendo. Vamos allá. The Montana wilderness stretched endlessly under the pale winter sun, a vast canvas of white and gray where life and death played out their ancient dance far from human eyes. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional crack of frozen branches and the soft whisper of snow falling from burdened pines. In this frozen world, a small drama was unfolding that would challenge the very laws of nature that governed these remote forests. Tiago Santos adjusted his position against the rough bark of an old pine, his weathered hands cradling a high-powered rifle. At 47, his face bore the marks of a life spent outdoors, deep lines etched by sun and wind, and eyes that had seen more of nature's brutality than most could stomach. The cold bit through his heavy clothing, but he remained motionless, his breath forming small clouds that dissipated in the frigid air. 20 yards ahead, tied to a young aspen with a length of steel cable, was a small spotted creature, a bobcat cub no more than 4 months old. The cub pulled desperately against its restraint, its small paws bloodied from hours of struggle. Its cries, weak but determined, pierced Tiago's consciousness like tiny daggers. This wasn't how he'd planned to spend his retirement after 30 years as a wildlife biologist. But desperation had a way of reshaping a man's principles, of blurring lines that once seemed immovable. Just a little longer, Tiago whispered, more to himself than to the suffering cub. They'll come soon. 3 months earlier, Tiago's 12-year-old daughter, Maya, had been diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia. The treatment existed, but their insurance wouldn't cover the experimental procedure. $300,000 stood between his daughter and a chance at life. When conventional options failed, loans denied, savings exhausted, fundraisers falling short, Tiago had turned to something he'd encountered only in whispers throughout his career: the exotic animal black market. A bobcat cub could fetch a decent sum from the right buyer, but a live, healthy wolf was worth far more, especially the elusive northern gray whose numbers had dwindled to critical levels in these parts. Tiago knew their habits, their territories, their weaknesses, and he knew that nothing drew a protective wolf pack like the distress call of a predator near their den, a sound that signaled a threat to their young. The bobcat cub, stolen from a den while its mother hunted, was merely a tool, bait. The ethical betrayal churned in his stomach, acid rising in his throat. Everything he'd stood for, conservation, protection, respect for nature's balance, sacrificed on the altar of paternal love. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Maya's face, growing paler by the day, her once energetic body now fragile like spun glass. "Movement," he whispered, his trained eye catching a shadow flitting between distant trees. Then another. The wolves had arrived. They emerged like ghosts from the tree line, 5 magnificent northern grays, their thick winter coats silvered by frost, moving with the fluid grace that had always left Tiago in awe. At their lead was a female, larger than most, with a distinctive scar running down her right flank. Tiago recognized her immediately. The researchers at the conservation center called her Luna, the alpha female who had evaded tracking attempts for years. She alone would fetch a price that could cover half of Maya's treatment. The wolf pack approached cautiously, communicating with subtle ear movements and tail positions that Tiago could read like a familiar language. They had detected the bobcat cub, but their behavior showed confusion rather than predatory intent. Luna moved forward slowly, her amber eyes fixed on the distressed cub. Behind her, the pack fanned out instinctively, securing the perimeter. Tiago raised his rifle, custom-fitted with a tranquilizer dart powerful enough to immobilize the alpha female without causing permanent harm. His finger tensed on the trigger, breath slowing as he prepared for the shot. One dart for Luna, then quick work with the net launcher for at least one more wolf before the pack scattered. It would be enough. It had to be enough. But what happened next caused Tiago's finger to freeze on the trigger. Luna approached the bobcat cub directly, her powerful jaws capable of crushing its small skull in an instant. The cub hissed weakly, a pitiful defense against the formidable predator. Instead of attacking, Luna began to inspect the restraint, her intelligent eyes following the cable to where it was secured around the tree. She pawed at it tentatively, then with more purpose. "What the hell?" Tiago breathed, his rifle lowering slightly in confusion. The other wolves maintained their distance, alert to any danger, while Luna continued her inspection. Then, to Tiago's utter disbelief, she began to gnaw at the cable where it met the tree, her powerful jaws working methodically at the restraint. 20 years studying these animals, and Tiago had never witnessed anything like it. Wolves were intelligent, yes, capable of complex social behaviors and problem-solving, but this deliberate attempt to free another predator, a natural competitor, defied explanation. The crack of a branch behind him shattered the moment. Tiago turned, his heart lurching as he found himself staring into the alert green eyes of a Forest Service ranger no more than 15 feet away. The woman's gaze moved from Tiago to his rifle, then to the scene beyond where the wolves were gathered around the restrained cub. "Federal Wildlife Service," she said quietly, her own rifle raised slightly in a clear warning. "Lower your weapon, slowly." Tiago's mind raced through his options, each one worse than the last. Run, fight, try to explain. How could he possibly justify what he was doing? The irony wasn't lost on him. Caught in the act of breaking every principle he'd upheld throughout his professional life by someone doing the job he once considered a calling. "Please," he started, but words failed him as he glanced back toward the wolves. In that moment of distraction, Luna succeeded in her task. The cable, frayed by her persistent efforts, snapped free from the tree. The bobcat cub, suddenly released, tumbled backward, but quickly regained its footing. Rather than fleeing immediately, it stood frozen, as if processing its unexpected freedom. What happened next would be documented in wildlife research papers for years to come, debated in university classrooms and conservation forums worldwide. Instead of turning on the vulnerable cub, Luna gently nudged it with her muzzle, urging it away from the area. The cub, operating on instinct rather than logic, scrambled in the direction indicated, disappearing into the underbrush. The wolf pack closed ranks and melted back into the forest, their mission, whatever incomprehensible directive had guided them, apparently complete. "Lower your weapon," the ranger repeated, her voice firmer now, "or I will be forced to fire." Tiago slowly placed his rifle on the ground, his mind still processing what he had just witnessed. As the ranger approached, handcuffs ready, he found himself speaking almost involuntarily. "Did you see that? Did you see what they did?" The ranger's expression shifted slightly, professional detachment giving way to momentary wonder. "I did," she acknowledged, securing his wrists with practiced movements. "And I've been tracking this particular pack for 3 years. That's Luna, the alpha. She's unusual. I've never seen anything like it," Tiago said, his voice hollow, as the implications of both what he'd witnessed and his current situation crashed over him. "They shouldn't have done that. Wolves don't do that." The ranger, whose name badge identified her as Martinez, guided him toward the forest trail. "No, they don't. At least they're not supposed to." She studied him with newfound curiosity. "You seem to know something about wolves. Mind telling me why a knowledgeable person would be out here with a tranquilizer rifle and a tethered bobcat cub?" Tiago's shoulders slumped, the weight of his choices pressing down harder than any physical burden he'd ever carried. "It's my daughter," he began, the words catching in his throat. "She's dying." Ranger Martinez's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "Let's get back to the station. You can tell me the whole story there." As they trekked through the snow-covered forest, Tiago kept looking back, searching for any sign of the wolf pack or the freed bobcat cub. But the wilderness had reclaimed its secrets, the only evidence of the extraordinary encounter their tracks in the fresh snow, wolf prints and tiny bobcat paws, moving in tandem for a short distance before separating, each to their own path. The ranger station was a modest building of weathered timber and stone, nestled among towering pines at the edge of the national forest. Inside, Ranger Elena Martinez removed Tiago's handcuffs but kept him under close watch as she filed her initial report. The small office smelled of coffee and pine, the walls adorned with wildlife conservation posters and topographical maps marked with colored pins tracking various species movements. "Coffee?" she offered, gesturing to a pot on a small counter. Tiago nodded silently, rubbing his wrists where the metal had bit into his skin. His mind remained in the forest, replaying the scene of Luna freeing the bobcat cub over and over, searching for some rational explanation that aligned with everything he thought he knew about predator behavior. Elena placed a steaming mug in front of him and took the seat across the table. At 36, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone completely at home in the wilderness. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her eyes, sharp and assessing, missed nothing. "You said your daughter is sick," she began, her tone neutral but not unkind. "Start there." For the next 30 minutes, Tiago spoke without interruption, the story pouring out of him in a torrent of anguish and desperate justification. Maya's diagnosis, the astronomical cost of treatment, the black market contact who'd promised enough money for the capture of live wolves. His voice cracked when he described how thin Maya had become, how the light in her eyes dimmed a little more each day. "She loves wolves," he said, bitter irony twisting his features. "Has wolf posters all over her hospital room, calls them her spirit animals." He stared into his coffee, now gone cold. What kind of father betrays his daughter's spirit animals to save her life? Elena had listened without judgment, taking occasional notes. Now she leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "What you were doing is a federal crime. Multiple counts. Endangered species trafficking alone carries up to 5 years imprisonment and fines up to $250,000. Tiago closed his eyes, the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. "I know. But what I witnessed out there..." Elena shook her head, a hint of wonder creeping into her professional demeanor. "That behavior is unprecedented. Luna's actions contradict everything we understand about interspecies competition." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "I need to make some calls." Before she could reach for the phone, the radio on her belt crackled to life. "Ranger Martinez, come in. Over." She unclipped it. "Martinez here. Go ahead. We've got hikers reporting unusual wolf activity near Cooper Ridge. Pack behavior outside normal parameters. They're saying the wolves appear to be escorting something smaller, possibly injured wildlife. Over." Elena's eyes locked with Tiago's, both recognizing the implication immediately. "Copy that. Get coordinates. I'm bringing in a wildlife specialist to investigate. Martinez out." She returned the radio to her belt and fixed Tiago with an intense stare. "Your bobcat cub and my wolf pack appear to be making headlines. You can't possibly be suggesting that Luna didn't just free the cub, but is now protecting it?" That's exactly what I'm suggesting, and you're going to help me document it. I'm in custody, Tiago reminded her, confusion evident. Elena's mouth tightened into a thin line. Let's call it provisional release into my supervision. Your expertise might be valuable, and frankly, I want a second professional to witness whatever's happening. This could change everything we think we know about interspecies relationships in crisis situations. 20 minutes later, they were in Elena's Forest Service truck, heading deep into the wilderness along service roads rarely used outside emergency situations. Tiago sat stiffly in the passenger seat, still processing the sudden change in his circumstances. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked as the truck bounced over the uneven terrain. Elena kept her eyes on the difficult road. 20 years ago, my younger brother was diagnosed with the same type of leukemia as your daughter. The treatment existed then too, but it was experimental, prohibitively expensive. Tiago turned to study her profile, understanding beginning to dawn. My parents were teachers, she continued, navigating around a fallen branch. No special connections, no hidden wealth. They did everything right, everything legal. Applied for every program, grant, and charity. Held fundraisers. Sold our house. She paused, her knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. He died 3 months after diagnosis. The silence that followed felt like its own presence in the cab of the truck. "I'm sorry," Tiago offered inadequately. "I became a ranger because I needed to find something bigger than my grief. Something that made sense when nothing else did." She glanced at him briefly. "The wilderness has rules, predictable patterns. Until today, when I saw Luna free that cub, I believed those patterns were immutable." They reached a clearing where another Forest Service vehicle was parked. 2 hikers, a man and woman in their 30s with expensive outdoor gear, stood nearby talking with another ranger. All 3 looked up as Elena and Tiago approached. "They moved north along the ridgeline," the other ranger reported, pointing toward a rocky outcropping. "Hikers got pictures." He handed Elena a digital camera. She scrolled through the images, then wordlessly passed the camera to Tiago. The photos, though taken from a distance, clearly showed Luna and 3 other wolves moving in formation around a small spotted figure, the bobcat cub, somehow keeping pace with them despite its earlier ordeal. "This is impossible," Tiago murmured, but the evidence was right there in his hands. The female hiker stepped forward. "We're wildlife photographers from National Geographic," she explained. "We've documented wolf behavior in 3 different countries, and we've never seen anything like this. The pack is deliberately moving at the cub's pace, and the alpha female keeps checking on it. They're not treating it as prey or competition. They're treating it almost like one of their own," her partner finished. Elena turned to Tiago. "Your professional assessment?" He handed the camera back, mind racing through possibilities. Wolf packs have been known to occasionally adopt orphaned wolf pups, even from other packs. There are rare documented cases of interspecies fostering in captivity, but wild wolves adopting a bobcat cub, deliberately freeing it from a restraint, and then protecting it. He shook his head. There's no precedent for this. Could the cub be injured in a way that's triggering some kind of caretaking response? Elena suggested. Possibly. Predators sometimes exhibit aberrant behavior around injured animals, but it typically manifests as mercy killing or abandonment, not protection. Tiago's scientific mind engaged despite his personal circumstances. There must be some environmental factor we're missing. The male photographer consulted his GPS. They're heading toward the North Ridge cave system. If that's their den site, and they're taking the cub there. A strange hope began to build in Tiago's chest, not for himself, but for what this unprecedented behavior might mean for understanding these creatures he'd spent his life studying. For the first time since Maya's diagnosis, Something pierced the fog of his desperation. Pure scientific curiosity. "We need to follow them," he said, turning to Elena. "But carefully, without disrupting whatever is happening. If they're truly adopting this cub, it could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies relationships in the wild." Elena studied him for a long moment, perhaps searching for signs that this was some kind of escape attempt. Whatever she saw in his eyes must have satisfied her. "Agreed, but you stay with me at all times." She turned to the other ranger. "Contact Dr. Wilkins at the University Research Station. Tell her to bring tracking equipment and a wildlife veterinarian if possible. No tranquilizers unless absolutely necessary for the animal's safety." As they gathered their gear, Tiago found himself in the bizarre position of tracking the very animals he had planned to capture just hours earlier, now with entirely different intentions. The irony wasn't lost on him, nor was the slim chance that this scientific anomaly might somehow create an opportunity to help Maya in a way he hadn't considered. "Ready?" Elena asked, checking her radio and GPS. Tiago nodded, zipping up his jacket against the intensifying cold. The sun was beginning its early winter descent, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. "Then let's find out what these wolves are trying to tell us." The wilderness transformed as afternoon faded into evening, shadows deepening between trees, and the air growing sharper with cold. Tiago and Elena moved with practiced stealth through the forest, following tracks in the snow that told a story neither could fully comprehend. The wolf pack's prints were clear and purposeful, and among them, impossibly, the smaller paw marks of the bobcat cub, steadily moving northward. "They're maintaining a consistent pace," Tiago observed in a hushed voice, kneeling to examine a fresh set of tracks. "See how the wolves' stride has shortened? They're accommodating the cub's speed." Elena nodded, recording their findings with quick notes and photographs. "The cub should be exhausted after being restrained for hours. I'm surprised it can keep up at all. Adrenaline maybe, or..." Tiago paused, noticing something in the tracks ahead. "Wait, look at this pattern." The tracks showed where the cub had faltered, its stride breaking rhythm. Immediately, the wolf's prints circled around it, creating a protective formation. Most revealing were Luna's tracks, showing where she had stopped and waited, her large paws positioned directly beside the cub's smaller ones for several steps afterward. "She's supporting it," Elena whispered, awe breaking through her professional reserve. "Physically supporting it when it tires." Tiago couldn't reconcile what he was seeing with everything he knew about predator behavior. His scientific mind scrambled for explanations: aberrant pack dynamics, neurological abnormalities in the alpha female, some environmental contaminant affecting cognitive function. But none seemed adequate to explain the methodical rescue and ongoing protection they were witnessing. They continued following the trail as darkness began to fall, using headlamps sparingly to avoid disturbing the animals they tracked. The temperature plummeted with nightfall, their breath forming crystalline clouds in the beam of light. The forest grew more rugged as they approached the ridge, terrain becoming steeper and rockier. "If they're heading to the cave system, we should see signs soon," Elena said, consulting her GPS. "There's a natural spring near the largest entrance. Game trails converge there." True to her prediction, the tracks soon joined a well-worn path used by various wildlife. The spring bubbled from rocks nearby, its water somehow resisting the freezing temperatures. The area around it showed heavy use, countless animal prints pressed into the soft earth, plants browsed by herbivores, territory markings from various predators. But something else caught Tiago's attention. He moved closer to the spring, shining his light on a small, cleared area near the water. "Elena," he called softly, "you need to see this." She joined him, her light joining his to illuminate what could only be described as a deliberate arrangement. Small branches had been placed in a rough circle lined with pine needles and dried grass, Within this makeshift nest lay several scraps of rabbit fur and a partially eaten fish. They brought it food, Elena breathed, and made it a resting place. This goes beyond unusual behavior, Tiago said, his scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before his eyes. This is tool use, environmental manipulation. Wolves don't do this. Elena carefully photographed the site from multiple angles. There's your proof that they do. A soft sound from above made them both freeze. Slowly, they raised their lights toward the ridgeline 20 feet above them. There, looking down with unblinking amber eyes, stood Luna. The massive wolf observed them silently, making no move to flee or threaten. Behind her, barely visible in the darkness, 3 other wolves stood guard. "She's not running," Tiago whispered. "She knows who we are." "She remembers us from earlier today," Elena agreed, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "But where's the cub?" As if in answer to her question, a small spotted head peeked out from behind Luna's forelegs. The bobcat cub had grown bolder since its rescue, its natural fear of the wolves apparently overcome by whatever inexplicable bond had formed between them. For several minutes, the 2 humans and the animals regarded each other in silence. Then, with deliberate slowness, Luna turned and led her pack and their unusual adoptee up a barely visible trail toward what must be the cave entrance. "They're showing us the way," Elena said, holstering her light to free her hands for climbing. "Or leading us away from something," Tiago countered, though he too began to follow. The climb was challenging in the darkness, loose rocks sliding beneath their boots and thorny brush catching at their clothing. By the time they reached the ledge where they'd spotted the wolves, the animals had disappeared. A large cave opening yawned before them, a blast of warmer air flowing from its depths. "Cave systems maintain constant temperatures," Tiago noted automatically. "Perfect den site." They paused at the entrance, both experienced enough to know the dangers of approaching a wolf den. Elena radioed their position to her colleagues, then turned to Tiago. "We shouldn't go in without backup," she said. "Cave mapping equipment at minimum, and we need Dr. Wilkins here to document this properly." Tiago knew she was right, but something pulled at him, an urgency he couldn't explain. "Just a few feet," he suggested, "just to confirm they've gone inside." Elena hesitated, then nodded. "Stay behind me, and we go no further than where we can still see the entrance." They switched their headlamps to red light, less disruptive to nocturnal animals, and stepped cautiously into the cave. The floor sloped gently downward, the passage wide enough for them to walk side by side. About 30 feet in, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and their lights revealed something that stopped them both in their tracks. The cave floor was covered with evidence of long-term wolf habitation, bones, fur, paw prints pressed into the soft earth. But interspersed with these expected signs were items that had no business in a wolf den: scraps of colored fabric tied to protruding rocks, small trinkets arranged in patterns, smooth stones placed in circular formations. "These are human objects," Elena said, her voice tight with disbelief. "Deliberately placed." Before Tiago could respond, a soft whine echoed from deeper in the cave. Their lights caught the reflection of multiple pairs of eyes watching from a recessed area, the wolves observing the human intruders with neither fear nor aggression. "We should go," Tiago whispered, suddenly aware they had crossed some threshold they didn't understand. As they backed toward the entrance, Elena's radio crackled unexpectedly in the silence. Both froze as a voice cut through the static. "Ranger Martinez, do you copy? University team is 20 minutes from your position. Over." The wolves didn't react to the sudden noise as wild animals should. Instead, Luna emerged from the shadows and padded deliberately toward them, stopping 10 feet away. The bobcat cub followed, staying close to her side but watching the humans with unmistakable curiosity. "What in God's name is happening here?" Tiago murmured, his scientific worldview crumbling in the face of behavior that defied all natural explanation. Elena slowly reached for her camera, but before she could take a picture, Luna turned and moved deeper into the cave, the cub following. It wasn't a retreat, it was an invitation. "We need to wait for the research team," Elena said, though her voice lacked conviction. "This needs to be documented properly." "Something's not right," Tiago replied, scanning the cave with new eyes. "These arrangements, these objects, they're too deliberate." A terrible suspicion began to form in his mind. What if Luna's pack isn't just unusually intelligent? What if they've had contact with humans before? Not just casual contact, but interaction? Elena shook her head. "This is a protected wilderness area. The nearest research station monitors from a distance. No one's running cognitive experiments out here." "Are you sure about that?" Tiago pointed to what looked like a faded marking on the cave wall, partially obscured by years of dust and smoke. "Because that looks man-made." They moved closer, and Elena used her sleeve to gently wipe away the accumulated grime. Beneath it was a symbol etched into the stone, a crude but unmistakable drawing of a wolf and what appeared to be a smaller feline figure, standing side by side within a circle. "This is old," Elena whispered. "Very old." The radio crackled again. "Ranger Martinez, please respond. Over." With visible reluctance, she unclipped the device. "Martinez here. We've located the wolf den and confirmed unusual behavior. Proceed to our coordinates with caution. Over." Replacing the radio, she turned to Tiago, her expression troubled. "Whatever's happening here goes beyond today's incident with the cub." "I think," Tiago said slowly, "we've stumbled onto something much bigger than either of us realizes." Dr. Amelia Wilkins arrived with the efficiency of someone accustomed to being called to remote locations at inconvenient hours. At 52, she was a legend in wildlife biology circles, known for her groundbreaking work on predator cognition and her uncompromising research standards. Her team, 2 graduate students and a wildlife veterinarian, followed with equipment cases and scientific instruments Tiago recognized from his own field days. Introductions were brief, functional. If Dr. Wilkins was surprised to find a suspected poacher working alongside a forest ranger, she didn't show it. Her focus remained entirely on the anomalous behavior they'd reported. "Show me everything," she instructed, already unpacking specialized cameras designed for low-light wildlife documentation. "Start with the tracks." For the next hour, Elena and Tiago led the researchers through their discoveries, from the initial rescue site to the cave entrance. Dr. Wilkins absorbed the information with minimal commentary, occasionally directing her team to take samples or measurements. Only when they reached the cave did her professional composure crack slightly. "This is unexpected," she murmured, examining the arranged objects with a small UV light. "These patterns are not random." "That's what we thought," Elena confirmed. "And there's more." She led them to the etched drawing they'd discovered. Dr. Wilkins studied the marking intently, running her fingers along the grooves in the stone. "This isn't recent. The weathering pattern suggests significant age." She turned to her graduate students. "Carbon dating when we get samples back to the lab, and I want infrared imaging of the entire wall. There may be more markings we can't see with the naked eye." The veterinarian, Dr. Chen, had been examining the cave floor with painstaking attention. "There's something else you should see," he called from near the back of the chamber. "I'm finding fur samples from multiple species, but arranged in what appears to be deliberate patterns, not consistent with normal feeding or nesting behavior." Tiago moved to join him, grateful for the scientific focus that temporarily displaced thoughts of Maya and his own precarious legal situation. Dr. Chen was right. Small tufts of fur from different animals had been placed in distinct groupings throughout the chamber. Bobcat, deer, rabbit, fox. Dr. Chen identified each sample methodically. And here, this appears to be lynx fur, which is unusual for this region. Dr. Wilkins joined them, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "We're setting up a full monitoring system," she announced. "Infrared cameras, audio recording, motion sensors. I want everything documented when the pack returns." "If they return," Tiago cautioned, "our presence may have disturbed them enough to relocate." Dr. Wilkins gave him an appraising look. "You're Tiago Santos, aren't you? I reviewed your paper on adaptive behaviors in isolated wolf populations 5 years ago. Good work." Despite everything, pride flickered briefly in Tiago's chest. "Thank you." "Which makes your current situation all the more perplexing." Her tone remained neutral, but the implicit question hung in the air between them. Before Tiago could respond, one of the graduate students called out from the cave entrance. "Movement outside. The pack is returning." Dr. Wilkins immediately took charge. Everyone maintained position and absolute silence, no sudden movements, no lights except the infrared cameras. They retreated to the edges of the chamber as instructed. Tiago found himself pressed against the cool cave wall beside Elena, their shoulders touching in the darkness. The minutes stretched painfully as they waited. The only sound their controlled breathing and the faint electronic hum of recording equipment. The wolves entered like shadows, almost invisible except for the gleam of their eyes and the soft clicking of claws on stone. Luna led as expected, followed by 3 adult wolves and, remarkably, the bobcat cub, moving with increasing confidence among its unlikely guardians. Through the dim glow of the night vision monitors, they watched as the wolves settled into the chamber, apparently unconcerned by the human presence or the subtle changes to their environment. Most extraordinary was the behavior of Luna toward the cub. She guided it to a specific area near the back of the cave, where the researchers now noticed a depression in the earth lined with soft materials. The cub curled into this prepared space while Luna performed what could only be described as a security check, moving methodically around the chamber before settling beside her adopted charge. "She's treating it exactly like a wolf pup," Dr. Chen whispered, his professional detachment momentarily overcome. Complete adoption behavior. For nearly an hour, they observed in reverent silence as the pack engaged in normal denning activities, with one remarkable difference. The bobcat cub was fully integrated into their social structure, receiving grooming, attention, and what appeared to be deliberate instruction from Luna on proper den behavior. Eventually, Dr. Wilkins signaled for them to retreat toward the entrance. Outside, under the cold brilliance of the winter stars, she finally spoke what they were all thinking. "This isn't just unusual behavior. This is a direct contradiction of established understanding of interspecies relationships in apex predators. Could it be some form of misplaced maternal instinct?" Tiago suggested, falling easily into the familiar rhythm of scientific hypothesis. "Luna might have lost pups recently." Dr. Wilkins shook her head. "The entire pack is participating in the care, not just the alpha female, and the arrangement of objects in the den suggests cognitive processes we don't typically attribute to canids in the wild." "What about the etching on the wall?" Elena asked. "Could there be a historical precedent we're unaware of? Some traditional knowledge about relationships between wolves and other predators in this region?" "It's possible," Dr. Wilkins conceded. "I'll need to consult with anthropologists who specialize in indigenous knowledge of this area." She turned to Tiago, her expression suddenly direct. "Ranger Martinez briefed me on your circumstances while we were setting up equipment. I understand your daughter is at Sacred Heart Children's Hospital in Missoula." Tiago stiffened, unprepared for the abrupt change in subject. "Yes. I'm on the board there," she continued matter-of-factly. The experimental treatment your daughter needs. It's Dr. Reyes's immunotherapy protocol, correct? Yes, but how did you... I've been funding part of that research for 3 years. Dr. Wilkins's voice softened slightly. Mr. Santos, what you attempted today was illegal and ethically indefensible. But I understand desperate actions by desperate parents. I've seen too many. Hope and shame warred within Tiago's chest. The treatment costs. There's a compassionate use program that Dr. Reyes hasn't fully implemented yet. 3 spots. 1 is available. She held up a hand as Tiago started to speak. I'm not offering charity or a bribe for your scientific cooperation. I'm suggesting that your expertise on wolf behavior could be valuable to this investigation, which I suspect will continue for months, if not years. The university could bring you on as a research consultant. With compensation sufficient to qualify for the program, Elena interjected, understanding immediately. Dr. Wilkins nodded. Exactly. Legitimate employment with legitimate benefits, including medical coverage that would allow your daughter to qualify for compassionate use access. Tiago's mind reeled, unable to process this sudden change in fortune. After months of closed doors and rejected applications, was it possible that his worst decision had somehow led to Maya's best chance? Why would you do this? He managed finally. Dr. Wilkins gestured toward the cave. Because what's happening in there could revolutionize our understanding of cognitive development in apex predators. And because I need the best researchers I can get, regardless of their recent lapses in judgment. Her gaze was unflinching. Also because 20 years ago, I lost my son to the same type of leukemia. Medicine has advanced. No parent should have to go through that now. The simple statement, delivered without drama or sentimentality, hit Tiago with unexpected force. He looked at Elena, whose expression reflected his own stunned hope. The legal charges, he began, will need to be addressed, Dr. Wilkins confirmed. But if Ranger Martinez is willing to file her report emphasizing your cooperation and the extraordinary circumstances, there's room for prosecutorial discretion. Elena nodded firmly. I think the interests of justice would be better served by Mr. Santos's expertise than by his incarceration. For the first time since Maya's diagnosis, Tiago felt something like genuine hope unfurling in his chest. Not just for his daughter's treatment, but for redemption, a chance to contribute to understanding the very creatures he had nearly betrayed. There's something else you should know, he said, making a decision. When I was tracking the wolves earlier before my attempt, I noticed unusual markings on trees throughout their territory. Deliberate scratches that didn't match normal territorial markers. I dismissed it at the time, but now, seeing the arrangements in the cave, the university research camp materialized overnight, a collection of specialized tents and equipment stations set up at a respectful distance from the cave system. By morning, Dr. Wilkins had assembled an expanded team that included an anthropologist, a cognitive animal behavior specialist, and 2 more graduate students. The operation had the efficient buzz of a well-funded scientific expedition, though the hastily issued permits and rushed deployment spoke to the unprecedented nature of their discovery. Tiago had spent the night in a small tent under the loose supervision of Ranger Martinez. His status remained ambiguous, neither free nor formally arrested, occupying a liminal space that seemed appropriate given the extraordinary circumstances. He'd been allowed a brief call to the hospital where Maya was being treated, speaking in carefully coded language to tell her he'd found a new path forward and would see her soon. He didn't mention Dr. Wilkins's offer, afraid to kindle hope until everything was formalized. As morning light filtered through the trees, Tiago emerged to find Dr. Wilkins conferring with Dr. Sandra Littlewolf, the anthropologist who had arrived before dawn. Dr. Littlewolf was a compact woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in field research. "Ah, Mr. Santos." Dr. Wilkins beckoned him over. Dr. Little Wolf specializes in indigenous knowledge systems of the Northern Rockies, particularly as they relate to wildlife behavior and human-animal relationships. The anthropologist regarded Tiago with keen interest. "Dr. Wilkins tells me you discovered something rather extraordinary yesterday." "I'm not sure discovered is the right word," Tiago admitted. "I'm still trying to make sense of what I witnessed." "The marking you found in the cave," Dr. Little Wolf continued, pulling out a tablet that displayed enhanced images of the etching. "It's consistent with pictographic styles used by several indigenous nations of this region, particularly the Blackfeet and Kootenai peoples. The imagery, a wolf and smaller feline figure within a circle, has particular significance." Despite everything, Tiago's scientific curiosity engaged immediately. "What kind of significance?" "There are stories," she replied, choosing her words carefully, "about unique relationships between predator species that transcend the expected ecological dynamics. Most anthropologists have categorized these as purely symbolic or metaphorical, creation stories or moral teachings rather than literal accounts of animal behavior." "But you think differently," Elena said, joining them with coffee cups for everyone. Dr. Little Wolf accepted hers with a nod of thanks. "I've documented similar accounts across multiple tribes with no historical contact, different languages, different cultural contexts, yet remarkably consistent descriptions of unusual cooperative behaviors between species that should, by all conventional understanding, be competitors or predator-prey." "Like wolves and bobcats," Tiago said. "Precisely. The stories often involve an act of mercy or rescue, followed by unexpected alliance." She gestured toward the cave. "What you've witnessed here has been described in oral traditions dating back hundreds, possibly thousands of years." The implications sent a chill down Tiago's spine that had nothing to do with the morning cold. "Are you suggesting this behavior is traditional, learned across generations of wolves?" "That would be an extraordinary leap," Dr. Wilkins cautioned. "We need substantial evidence before proposing cultural transmission of complex behaviors in non-human species." "And yet," Dr. Little Wolf countered mildly, "we already recognize that wolves pass hunting techniques and territory knowledge through generations. Is it so impossible that they might also transmit more complex social behaviors?" The discussion was interrupted by one of the graduate students rushing toward them, tablet in hand. "Dr. Wilkins, the infrared cameras captured something overnight that you need to see." They gathered around the screen as the student pulled up footage time-stamped at 3:17 a.m. The thermal imaging showed the wolf pack and bobcat cub huddled in their sleeping formation, when suddenly all the wolves raised their heads simultaneously, alert to something outside the camera's range. Rather than exhibiting alarm, they seemed to be responding to a familiar presence. Moments later, another thermal signature entered the frame, a large adult bobcat, moving with the caution of a wild animal in unfamiliar territory, but without the extreme wariness typically shown toward wolves. "Is that?" Elena began. "The mother," Tiago confirmed, recognizing the distinctive size and movement pattern. "She found her cub." They watched, transfixed, as the adult bobcat approached the wolf pack. Luna rose and moved forward, meeting the feline in what could only be described as a non-aggressive greeting. The two predators, natural enemies by all conventional understanding, stood face to face for several seconds before Luna stepped aside, creating a path to the cub. The reunion between mother and offspring unfolded with touching simplicity, gentle nuzzling, quiet vocalizations barely picked up by the equipment's sensitive microphones. The cub seemed torn, moving between its birth mother and its wolf protectors with visible confusion. What happened next defied explanation. Rather than taking her cub and fleeing, The mother bobcat settled into the wolf den, positioning herself and her offspring in a protected corner, while the wolves resumed their previous positions, apparently accepting these new denmates without conflict. "This goes beyond unusual behavior," Dr. Wilkins said, her scientific reserve finally cracking. "This is unprecedented interspecies cooperation. The mother isn't just retrieving her cub, she's joining the wolf pack. Or the pack is extending protection to both of them," Dr. Little Wolf suggested, "exactly as described in the traditional stories." The implications were staggering, not just for understanding animal behavior, but for evolutionary biology, ecological relationships, and the very foundations of competitive exclusion theory that underpinned much of modern biological science. "We need to document everything," Dr. Wilkins decided. "Every interaction, every behavior pattern. This could rewrite textbooks." As the research team mobilized with renewed purpose, Tiago found himself pulled aside by Elena. She led him away from the main camp, toward a quiet spot overlooking the valley. "I've been in contact with the district attorney's office," she said without preamble. "They're willing to consider alternative resolution in your case, given the circumstances and your cooperation." Tiago's heart leapt. What kind of resolution? Community service in the form of research assistance to Dr. Wilkins's team, restitution through educational programs about wildlife conservation, and probation rather than incarceration. She met his eyes directly. But most importantly, they won't oppose Dr. Wilkins's employment offer, which means Maya could qualify for the treatment program immediately. The relief was so intense it left him lightheaded. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Elena cautioned. "There's a condition. The DA wants a complete statement about your contact with the wildlife trafficking network. Names, locations, everything you know." The request sent a jolt of fear through him. The people he'd contacted weren't amateurs. They were organized criminals with international connections and a reputation for brutal retaliation. "If I do that, they could—" "I know the risks," Elena interrupted gently. "But those people will continue targeting endangered species unless they're stopped. The prosecutor is offering witness protection if necessary." The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Maya's life against his safety. "I'll tell them everything I know." Elena nodded, unsurprised. "I've arranged transport to Missoula this afternoon. You can give your statement to federal authorities there, then go directly to the hospital. Dr. Wilkins has already contacted Dr. Reyes about Maya's case." Today? Tiago could hardly process the sudden acceleration of events. "Today. But there's something else you should know." Elena's expression became troubled. "The wolf pack, Luna and the others, they're part of a controversial research project that was supposedly terminated 3 years ago. Dr. Wilkins found records last night after you mentioned the unusual markings." "What kind of research project?" "Cognitive enhancement through early development intervention. The project was shut down for ethical concerns, but not before several wolf pups, including Luna, were subjected to experimental protocols designed to increase problem-solving abilities and social cognition." The revelation landed like a physical blow. "They experimented on wolf pups and then released them into the wild. The official record says all test subjects were retained in captivity, but DNA samples from Luna's fur confirm she's one of the missing experimental subjects." Elena looked toward the cave in the distance. "Which means what we're witnessing may not be natural behavior at all, but the result of human intervention in ways we never anticipated." The Federal Wildlife Service office in Missoula occupied a nondescript government building near the courthouse, its bland exterior belying the critical conservation work conducted inside. Tiago sat in a sterile interview room, exhaustion etched into every line of his face as he finished giving his statement. For 3 hours, he had detailed his contacts with the wildlife trafficking network, Names, meeting locations, payment arrangements, every scrap of information he possessed. And you're certain the individual who called himself Mercer mentioned connections to buyers in Eastern Europe? Special Agent Dawson asked, reviewing his notes with methodical precision. Yes. He specifically mentioned clients in Ukraine and Romania who pay premium prices for live specimens, especially predators. Tiago's voice was hoarse from talking. He showed me photographs of previous shipments, sedated wolves, mountain lions, even a young black bear. Dawson nodded, satisfaction evident in his tired eyes. Mr. Santos, your information corroborates an investigation we've been building for nearly 2 years. The network you've described is responsible for the disappearance of dozens of protected species across 5 states. Will it be enough to stop them? Tiago asked, thinking of Luna and her pack, of all the creatures targeted by people like Mercer. It's a significant break in the case, Dawson confirmed. Combined with evidence we already have, we should be able to secure warrants for several key players within days. The agent closed his notebook and leaned back, his professional demeanor softening slightly. Ranger Martinez explained your situation. For what it's worth, I've got a kid about your daughter's age. I can't say I wouldn't have considered desperate measures in your position. The simple statement of understanding from a law enforcement officer nearly broke Tiago's composure. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. We'll need you to remain available for follow-up questions and possible testimony, but given your cooperation and Dr. Wilkins's involvement, I don't anticipate any issues with the arrangement we've discussed. Dawson stood, signaling the end of the interview. There's a protection detail assigned to you and your daughter effective immediately, standard procedure when witnesses provide information about organized crime. The reality of what he'd done, turning informant against dangerous criminals, settled heavily on Tiago's shoulders. But as Dawson escorted him from the building to a waiting vehicle that would take him to the hospital, all he could think about was seeing Maya. Sacred Heart Children's Hospital gleamed in the afternoon sun, its modern architecture designed to appear welcoming rather than institutional. Dr. Amelia Wilkins was waiting in the lobby, her field clothes exchanged for a professional blazer and slacks. Mr. Santos, she greeted him briskly. Dr. Reyes is expecting us. We've reviewed Maya's case files and believe she's an excellent candidate for the protocol. How soon can we start? Tiago asked, following her toward the elevators. Assuming the paperwork clears and her current condition meets stability requirements potentially within 48 hours, Dr. Wilkins's efficient manner couldn't quite mask the compassion in her eyes. Your employment contract with the university is being processed on an emergency basis. Benefits should be active by tomorrow morning. The elevator doors opened to the pediatric oncology floor, a space transformed by colorful murals and playful designs that couldn't quite disguise its serious purpose. Tiago felt the familiar tightening in his chest that accompanied every visit, the mixture of hope, fear, and helplessness that defined his existence since Maya's diagnosis. They found her in the small recreation room, seated at a table with watercolor paints and paper. At 12, Maya had always been small for her age, but the disease had reduced her further, her frame fragile beneath the hospital gown. Yet her spirit remained vibrant, evident in the intensity with which she focused on her artwork. Maya, Tiago called softly. She looked up, her face lighting with a smile that pierced his heart. Dad, you came back early. Her gaze shifted curiously to Dr. Wilkins. This is Dr. Wilkins, Tiago explained, moving to embrace his daughter carefully, mindful of the IV line in her arm. She works with wolves, like I used to. Maya's interest sparked immediately. Real wolves? In the wild? Very real and very wild, Dr. Wilkins confirmed, her professional demeanor warming as she addressed the child. In fact, I just observed a wolf pack doing something scientists have never documented before. What were they doing? Maya asked, setting aside her paintbrush. Dr. Wilkins pulled up a chair. They adopted a bobcat cub that had been separated from its mother. Instead of treating it as prey, they're protecting it, teaching it wolf behaviors. And now the mother bobcat has joined them too. Maya's eyes widened with wonder. Like a mixed family, that's so cool. It's extraordinary, Dr. Wilkins agreed. And your father helped discover it. He's going to be working with my research team to study these wolves. You're going back to studying wolves? Maya turned to Tiago with such hope that it nearly undid him. For months she had watched him abandon his passion and principles in increasingly desperate attempts to fund her treatment. Yes, he managed, and there's something else. He glanced at Dr. Wilkins, who nodded encouragement. Dr. Wilkins knows about a special treatment that might help you, a new kind of medicine that teaches your body how to fight the cancer cells. Maya processed this with the serious consideration children often bring to important matters. Is it the one Dr. Reyes mentioned, the expensive one? Yes, Tiago admitted, but my new job comes with insurance that will help cover it. So I might get better? The question was so direct, so vulnerable that Tiago had to blink back tears. There's a very good chance, Dr. Wilkins answered when Tiago couldn't. Dr. Reyes thinks you're an excellent candidate. Maya considered this, then turned back to her painting, a wilderness scene featuring wolf-like shapes among trees. I knew you'd find a way, Dad. You always do. The simple faith humbled him, especially knowing how close he had come to betraying everything she believed about him. Later, after Maya had fallen asleep and Dr. Wilkins had departed to coordinate with Dr. Reyes, Tiago sat alone in the hospital room, listening to the rhythmic beeping of monitors. His phone vibrated with a text message from Elena. Thought you'd want to know. Mother bobcat and cub still with Wolfpack, showing coordinated hunting behaviors. Dr. Little Wolf found additional cave markings dating back 200+ years. This isn't the first time. Attached was a photo from one of the research cameras showing Luna and the adult bobcat moving together through forest undergrowth, the cub following closely behind. The implications were staggering, not just for science, but for understanding intelligence and cooperation across species barriers. He was composing a reply when another message arrived, this one from Dr. Wilkins. University board approved your position. Starting salary, $85K plus full benefits package effective immediately. Formal paperwork tomorrow. Protocol for Maya scheduled to begin Friday 9 a.m. Get some rest. The wolves will still be there when she's stronger. Tiago leaned back in the uncomfortable hospital chair, overwhelmed by the whiplash turn his life had taken in just 24 hours. From the depths of ethical compromise to unexpected redemption. From nearly losing his freedom to finding a path forward for Maya, from witnessing the impossible to becoming part of understanding it. The soft ping of an incoming email interrupted his thoughts. The sender was unfamiliar, Dr. Elizabeth Carey, with a university address. The subject line read simply, Project Prometheus, Cognitive Enhancement Research. Tiago opened it with growing apprehension. Mr. Santos, Dr. Wilkins informed me of your involvement with the Luna Pack and suggested I share my insights as the former lead researcher on Project Prometheus. I understand you've learned that Luna was among our research subjects. What you may not know is that she was exceptional even within the experimental group, demonstrating cognitive abilities far beyond our initial parameters. The project was officially terminated due to ethical concerns about releasing cognitively enhanced predators into the wild. However, the truth is more complex. Several subjects, including Luna, disappeared during a facility security breach that was never fully explained. We had reason to believe they were stolen by eco-activists opposed to our research. The fact that Luna has surfaced with her pack and is exhibiting complex cooperative behaviors with another species confirms our most radical hypotheses. that enhanced cognitive function in apex predators might lead to novel social adaptations that transcend species barriers. I would very much like to meet with you and Dr. Wilkins at your earliest convenience. There are aspects to Luna's development that may be critical to understanding what you're witnessing. Dr. Elizabeth Carey, former director, Project Prometheus Department of Cognitive Zoology. Tiago stared at the message, a chill running through him despite the hospital room's warmth. The wolves hadn't just been subjects in a terminated research project. They were escaped experimental animals whose full capabilities remained unknown, and now they were forming unprecedented alliances with other predator species in the wild. He glanced at Maya, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, unaware of the scientific earthquake unfolding around her father's discovery. The universe had a strange sense of symmetry. His desperate attempt to save her had led to a breakthrough that might revolutionize understanding of animal cognition, while the controversial research that created Luna might now, indirectly, help fund the treatment to save Maya's life. Dr. Elizabeth Carey did not match Tiago's expectations of a controversial researcher who had pushed ethical boundaries. Instead of the stern, clinical figure he had imagined, she was a soft-spoken woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a warm smile that immediately put him at ease. They met in the hospital cafeteria while Maya underwent her first immunotherapy treatment upstairs, Dr. Reyes having assured them that the initial infusion would take several hours and that Maya would likely sleep through most of it. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Dr. Carey said, stirring honey into her tea. "I've been following Dr. Wilkins's preliminary reports with great interest." Dr. Wilkins sat beside Tiago, her posture guarded. The tension between the two scientists was palpable. "Elizabeth," she acknowledged with professional courtesy but clear reservation. "Perhaps you could explain to Mr. Santos exactly what Project Prometheus entailed, without the sanitized version your university provided to federal regulators." Dr. Carey accepted the challenge with a small nod. Project Prometheus began as legitimate research into cognitive development in canid species. We were studying how early environmental enrichment affected problem-solving abilities and social learning. She paused, looking directly at Tiago. "But approximately 5 years ago, our funding source changed. A private donor with very specific interests began supporting our work on the condition that we explore more ambitious protocols." "What kind of protocols?" Tiago asked, already dreading the answer. "Targeted neurological interventions during critical developmental periods. Enhanced nutritional compounds designed to accelerate neural pathway formation. And eventually, limited genetic modification to activate specific cognitive pathways." Tiago felt his stomach twist. "You genetically modified wild wolves?" "No," Dr. Carey corrected quickly. "We modified embryos created through in vitro fertilization using genetic material from wild wolves. The subjects were born and raised in our facility. They were never intended for release." "Until they escaped," Dr. Wilkins interjected sharply. Dr. Carey's expression tightened. "They didn't escape, they were taken, during a carefully orchestrated security breach that suggested inside knowledge of our systems." She sighed, removing her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose. "I had opposed the genetic aspects of the research from the beginning. When the breach occurred, I was relieved. I believed the animals would either die in the wild or revert to standard wolf behaviors without the specialized environment we'd created." "But they didn't," Tiago said, thinking of Luna and her extraordinary actions. "No, they didn't." Dr. Carey's voice softened with what sounded like pride. "Luna was always special, even among the experimental group. Her problem-solving abilities exceeded our most optimistic projections. More importantly, she demonstrated something we hadn't anticipated: empathy across species barriers. During socialization tests, She formed bonds with non-canid animals that defied conventional understanding of predator psychology. Like adopting a bobcat cub, Dr. Wilkins murmured. Precisely. Though we never tested that specific scenario, Luna consistently showed protective behaviors toward smaller predator species introduced to her environment. We theorized that the genetic modifications had inadvertently affected the neurological pathways governing threat assessment and group identification. In plain English? Tiago asked. She doesn't see other predator species the way normal wolves do. Instead of registering them as competitors or threats, she recognizes them as potential allies or pack members under certain circumstances. Dr. Carey leaned forward, her scientific enthusiasm breaking through her reserve. What you witnessed, Luna freeing the bobcat cub and integrating it into her pack, that's the culmination of cognitive development we only theorized might be possible. Tiago struggled to process the implications. So the wolf pack's behavior isn't natural evolution or cultural learning, as Dr. Little Wolf suggested. It's the result of human tampering with their genetics. Dr. Carey winced at his blunt assessment. That's one interpretation. But consider this. The genetic modifications only created potential. Luna and her pack have been living wild for 3 years, developing and adapting those cognitive capabilities in ways we never directed or anticipated. What you're observing now is genuine innovation on their part. Innovation that aligns remarkably well with indigenous knowledge systems that Dr. Little Wolf has documented, Dr. Wilkins pointed out. Stories that predate your genetic tinkering by centuries. Dr. Carey's eyes lit with genuine curiosity. That's what fascinates me most. What if the modifications didn't create something new, but rather unlocked latent potential that already existed in wolf genetics? Potential that emerged naturally in isolated cases throughout history, but rarely persisted because it offered no clear evolutionary advantage. The scientific implications were staggering, but Tiago's focus remained practical. What does this mean for Luna's pack now? Are they dangerous? Should they be recaptured? Absolutely not, Dr. Carey said firmly, surprising both Tiago and Dr. Wilkins with her vehemence. Removing them from the wild now would be both ethically indefensible and scientifically short-sighted. They've established a functional social structure and are demonstrating unprecedented cooperative behaviors. They should be studied, protected, but not interfered with. For once, we agree, Dr. Wilkins said dryly, though I have serious concerns about the long-term ecological implications of cognitively enhanced predators establishing themselves in the wild. As do I, Dr. Carey admitted. Which is why I'm offering my complete research archives to your team. Every data point, every observation, every genetic marker we identified. It may help you anticipate behaviors or capabilities we never had the chance to observe in controlled settings. Their conversation was interrupted by Tiago's phone buzzing with an incoming call from Elena. He excused himself to answer it, stepping away from the table. Tiago, are you somewhere secure? Elena's voice was tense, setting off immediate alarm bells. Hospital cafeteria with Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Carey. What's wrong? Federal agents just raided 3 locations connected to the trafficking network you identified. They made several arrests, but Mercer wasn't among them. She paused, and Tiago could hear her moving to a more private location. His associates claim he's been tipped off about your cooperation. Cold fear washed through Tiago. Maya is safe, Elena assured him quickly. The protection detail is in place, and hospital security has been briefed. But I need you to stay put until additional personnel arrive. We're taking this threat very seriously. When Tiago returned to the table, his expression must have betrayed his concern because both scientists immediately tensed. What's happened? Dr. Wilkins asked. The trafficker I was in contact with knows I've cooperated with authorities. He's still at large. Tiago couldn't keep the worry from his voice. There's a protection detail, but we'll increase security at the research site as well, Dr. Wilkins decided immediately. If he knows about your involvement with our study, the wolves could also be at risk. Dr. Carey paled visibly. If someone like that were to learn about Luna's unique capabilities, the black market value would be exponentially higher than for normal wolves, Tiago finished grimly, not just as exotic pets, but for breeding or research. The realization created a grim solidarity among the three of them, temporarily bridging the ethical divides that separated their perspectives. Whatever their differences regarding Project Prometheus, they shared an absolute commitment to protecting Luna's pack from exploitation. Their discussion was interrupted by a hospital staff member approaching their table. "Mr. Santos, your daughter is asking for you. She's awake and doing well after her first treatment." Relief momentarily displaced Tiago's concerns. He excused himself, promising to continue their discussion later, and followed the nurse to Maya's room. He found her sitting up in bed, her complexion already showing a hint more color than it had that morning. "Hey, Dad," she greeted him with a tired smile. "Dr. Reyes says the medicine is already working. I can feel it fighting the bad cells." Tiago took her small hand in his, marveling at her resilience. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me more about the wolves and the bobcat," Maya requested, her eyes bright with interest despite her fatigue. "I want to hear everything." So he did, simplifying the complex scientific implications, but sharing the wonder of what he'd witnessed. Luna's determination to free the trapped cub, the pack's protection, the mother bobcat's return, and surprising integration into the wolf family. As he spoke, Maya's imagination clearly transported her from the sterile hospital room to the wild mountain forests. "When I get better," she declared with absolute certainty, "we should go see them together." Tiago smiled, despite the complications he knew lay ahead. "I'd like that very much." 3 weeks into Maya's treatment, the changes were nothing short of miraculous. Dr. Reyes used words like unprecedented response rate and exceptional cellular regeneration during his daily evaluations. The experimental immunotherapy, combined with a targeted genetic therapy component, was working exactly as its developers had hoped, teaching Maya's immune system to recognize and destroy the cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue untouched. Her strength returned in small but significant increments, her appetite improved, and most tellingly, the fierce light of her personality began to shine through the fog of illness that had dimmed it for so long. On this particular morning, Tiago entered her hospital room to find her sitting cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by printed photographs and scientific journals. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down the fresh clothes and books he'd brought from home. Maya looked up with an enthusiasm he hadn't seen in months. "Research. Dr. Wilkins brought me everything they've learned about Luna's pack. Look at this." She held up a thermal image showing the wolf pack moving in perfect formation through night-darkened forest, the bobcat mother and cub visible among them. "They're teaching the bobcats to hunt like wolves." Tiago smiled, taking the image. The research team had documented remarkable behavioral adaptations over the past weeks. The adult bobcat, whom they'd named Celine, had integrated seamlessly into the pack's hunting strategies, her natural stealth complementing the wolves' coordinated approach. Most extraordinary was how the pack had modified their techniques to capitalize on the bobcat's climbing abilities, developing what Dr. Wilkins called three-dimensional hunting patterns that were unprecedented in either species alone. "Dr. Wilkins says I can visit the research camp when my counts are good enough," Maya continued, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Maybe next week, if Dr. Reyes approves. I've been studying everything, so I'll understand what I'm seeing." Tiago sat beside her, heart full at seeing her so engaged. For months, cancer had narrowed her world to hospital rooms and treatment schedules. Now, even confined to the hospital, she was expanding again, reaching toward the natural world that had always fascinated her. "That sounds wonderful," he said. "I'm heading back to the research site today, actually. Dr. Carey is bringing some specialized equipment to help analyze Luna's vocalizations." The relationship between the two scientists, Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Carey, had evolved from initial tension to cautious collaboration. Dr. Carey's insights into Luna's cognitive development had proven invaluable, while Dr. Wilkins's rigorous field methodology ensured their observations met the highest scientific standards. Together with Dr. Little Wolf's anthropological perspective, they were constructing a revolutionary understanding of interspecies cooperation among apex predators. "Will you take more pictures for me?" Maya asked. "I want to see everything." "Of course," Tiago promised, "and maybe some video too, if we can get close enough without disturbing them." The protection detail assigned to them had become a familiar presence, rotating shifts of federal agents who maintained a discreet but vigilant watch. There had been no sign of Mercer or his associates, but authorities weren't taking any chances. The trafficking investigation had expanded significantly based on Tiago's information, with operations disrupted across 3 states. After spending the morning with Maya, Tiago made his way to the parking garage where his escort waited. The drive to the research site took nearly 2 hours, winding through increasingly remote terrain. The late winter landscape was beginning to show the first subtle signs of approaching spring: slightly longer days, occasional patches where melting snow revealed dormant earth beneath. The research camp had evolved considerably from its hasty initial setup. Now solar panels powered sophisticated monitoring equipment, and a small satellite dish provided internet connectivity, allowing real-time data sharing with university partners. A half-dozen researchers moved purposefully between stations, their work choreographed with the efficiency that comes from weeks of shared purpose. Elena greeted him as he arrived, her ranger uniform exchanged for practical field clothes. "Perfect timing. Luna's pack is on the move toward the eastern hunting grounds. Dr. Carey just finished calibrating the new acoustic monitors." They walked together toward the main research tent, where Dr. Wilkins, Dr. Carey, and Dr. Little Wolf were huddled around a display showing real-time tracking data from the radio collars that had been carefully placed on 2 of the pack members. Not Luna herself, as they'd decided any intervention with the Alpha might disrupt the delicate dynamics they were studying. "Ah, Tiago." Dr. Wilkins acknowledged his arrival without looking up from the display. "We're seeing something new. The pack has divided into 2 coordinated groups." Tiago moved closer to examine the data. Sure enough, the GPS markers showed 5 wolves moving in one direction, while Luna, another wolf, and both bobcats headed in another. "Split hunting strategy," he observed, "but mixing species in both groups." "Exactly," Dr. Carey confirmed, excitement evident in her voice. "They're adapting their hunting patterns based on prey distribution. The eastern group is tracking an elk herd, while Luna's group appears to be moving toward the rocky outcroppings where we've documented mountain goat activity. The bobcat's climbing abilities would be advantageous in that terrain," Tiago noted. Dr. Little Wolf looked up from her notes. "This aligns with traditional knowledge I've documented. Stories of the clever ones, wolves who form bonds with other hunters to overcome challenges no single species could manage alone. The question remains," Dr. Wilkins said, tapping the screen thoughtfully, "whether this behavior is solely the result of Luna's genetic modifications, or if we're observing the restoration of ancient alliance patterns that existed before modern human disruption of predator populations." "Perhaps it's both," Dr. Carey suggested. "The genetic modifications may have simply accelerated or enabled the expression of behavioral potentials that already existed within the species." The academic debate was interrupted by an alert from the perimeter security system. a network of motion sensors established around the camp's outer boundaries. Dr. Wilkins quickly pulled up the security feed on a separate monitor. "Probably deer again," she muttered. "We've had false alarms every day this week." But the image that appeared wasn't a deer. A human figure moved through the trees approximately 200 yards from camp, attempting to stay concealed but clearly making a deliberate approach. The camera's zoom function revealed a man in his 40s with a distinctive scar running from his right temple to his jaw. Tiago felt his blood run cold. "That's Mercer." Elena immediately reached for her radio to alert the security team, but before she could transmit, another alert triggered, this one from a different sector of the perimeter. A second figure, then a third, appeared on separate monitors. The research camp was being systematically surrounded. "Multiple intruders," Elena reported tensely into her radio. "At least 3 confirmed. Possible hostile intent. All personnel implement security protocol immediately." The camp had been prepared for this possibility. Within moments, researchers were moving quickly but calmly to secure sensitive equipment and data. Armed security personnel emerged from concealed positions, taking up defensive stances around the main structures. "We need to move everyone to the secure facility," Elena instructed, referring to the reinforced structure that had been established as a safety measure. "Tiago, stay with Dr. Carey. I'll coordinate with security." As they hurried to comply, Dr. Wilkins grabbed a portable hard drive containing their research data. "We can't let them get this," she said grimly. "If Mercer learns the full extent of Luna's capabilities, every cognitively enhanced wolf in existence would become a target." Outside, the camp erupted into controlled chaos as security personnel established a defensive perimeter. Shots echoed through the forest, warning fire from the protection detail. Return fire answered almost immediately, the sharp reports echoing across the valley. "They're better armed than we anticipated," Elena said tightly, joining them in the main research tent. "We need to evacuate. The helicopter is 20 minutes out." Dr. Little Wolf, who had been monitoring the tracking display, suddenly straightened. "Luna's group has changed direction," she announced. "They're moving toward the camp at unusual speed." All eyes turned to the display, where the GPS markers showing Luna, her wolf companion, and the 2 bobcats were indeed converging rapidly on their location. "They're responding to the gunfire," Dr. Carey realized. "They're coming to investigate." Tiago felt a surge of dread. If Luna's pack entered the conflict zone, they could be injured or killed in the crossfire. Worse, if Mercer and his people captured any of them alive. "We need to warn them off somehow," he said urgently. "How do you propose to communicate with wolves in the middle of a firefight?" Dr. Wilkins demanded, though her concern for the animals was equally evident. Before anyone could respond, the security radio crackled with an urgent transmission. "East perimeter breached. 2 hostiles approaching main research tent." The next few moments unfolded with nightmarish clarity. Elena drew her service weapon and positioned herself at the tent entrance, her ranger training evident in her calm, precise movements. Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Carey quickly gathered the most critical research materials, hard drives, notebooks, specimen samples, stuffing them into weatherproof cases designed for emergency evacuation. Dr. Little Wolf remained at the monitoring station, her eyes fixed on the approaching GPS signals of Luna's group. "They're accelerating," she reported tensely, "moving in coordinated formation through the eastern ravine, 7 minutes to our position at current speed." Tiago felt paralyzed between conflicting imperatives: protect the humans in the camp, protect the research that could save countless endangered species, protect the extraordinary wolf pack that had somehow become central to both his professional redemption and his daughter's recovery. His thoughts flashed to Maya, safely distant in her hospital room, unaware that her father was facing the very criminals he had betrayed. The sound of gunfire intensified outside, punctuated by shouted commands as the security team engaged the intruders. Then sudden silence fell, more terrifying than the chaos that had preceded it. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." A new voice, authoritative and amplified, echoed across the camp. "Back up," Elena breathed, relief flooding her features. They must have been monitoring and dispatched additional teams when the perimeter was breached. The tent flap ripped open. Instead of federal reinforcements, Mercer himself stood in the entrance, a hunting rifle aimed steadily at Elena. Blood streaked his face from a wound at his hairline, and his expression was a mask of cold fury. Behind him, a second man covered the tent's rear exit, effectively trapping them. "Santos," Mercer acknowledged, his voice eerily calm despite the violence implicit in his stance. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience." Tiago instinctively stepped forward, placing himself between Mercer and the others. "Federal agents are surrounding this camp right now. You have no way out." Mercer's laugh held no humor. "Those aren't feds outside. Those are my people in tactical gear. A simple diversion." His gaze shifted to the monitoring equipment, the tracking displays showing the wolf pack's movements. "So this is the research worth betraying our arrangement for. Special wolves, I gather. Worth far more than the standard specimens we discussed." "You need to leave," Elena stated firmly, her weapon still raised despite being outgunned. "Reinforcements are already en route." "Indeed they are," Mercer agreed smoothly. "My transport arrives in 15 minutes. Just enough time to collect what we came for." He gestured toward the equipment with his rifle barrel. "The tracking data, research notes, and you, Dr. Carey. My employer was quite specific about requiring your expertise along with the specimens." Dr. Carey paled visibly. "Your employer?" "He's very familiar with your work on Project Prometheus, quite eager to continue where you left off, but with fewer ethical constraints." Mercer's smile was predatory. "The Chinese biotech market is considerably more progressive regarding cognitive enhancement research." The implications were horrifying. Luna and her pack captured and exploited, their unique abilities weaponized under the guise of scientific advancement. Dr. Carey looked physically ill at the prospect. "The wolves won't be easily captured," Tiago warned, desperately playing for time. "They're intelligent, wary of humans." "Which is precisely why we came prepared," Mercer replied, nodding to his associate who produced a metal case from his backpack. "Long-range tranquilizer darts, specially formulated based on your own notes about their estimated body weight. 1 dart, 10 seconds to unconsciousness. No muss, no fuss." Dr. Littlewolf, who had remained silent during the confrontation, suddenly straightened at her monitoring station. "They're here," she announced quietly. Mercer frowned. "Who's here?" As if in answer, a chilling sound rose from just beyond the camp perimeter, not the expected howl of wolves, but something more deliberate and complex, a series of vocalizations that seemed almost structured, the sound repeated from multiple directions simultaneously, creating a disorienting acoustic effect. "What the hell is that?" Mercer's associate demanded, his rifle swinging toward the tent wall as shadows moved outside. "Coordinated vocalization," Dr. Carey breathed, recognition and awe mingling in her voice. "They're using acoustic distraction techniques we exposed them to during early training, creating the illusion of greater numbers." Mercer's expression hardened. "Get the tranquilizer gun ready. As soon as they're visible—" His instruction was cut short by a new development, not from outside the tent, but from the monitoring equipment. The displays showing camera feeds from around the perimeter suddenly filled with movement as Luna's pack appeared simultaneously on multiple screens, not charging into the camp as expected, but systematically moving around its edges, staying just within range of the cameras, appearing and disappearing with deliberate timing. "They're drawing attention to themselves," Dr. Wilkins realized, "keeping our focus on the perimeter." "While what?" Mercer demanded, his composure cracking slightly as he tried to track the animal's movements across multiple screens. The answer came with shocking suddenness, the distinct sound of helicopter rotors approaching from the west, far sooner than expected. Mercer's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "That's impossible. They can't be here yet." Elena's expression shifted to one of grim satisfaction. "You didn't account for our emergency protocols. The moment the perimeter was breached, an automated alert was sent to federal authorities with our exact coordinates. That's not your extraction team. That's a tactical response unit." Desperation replaced calculation in Mercer's eyes. He grabbed Dr. Carey roughly, positioning her as a human shield while backing toward the tent entrance. "We're leaving. Now. She comes with us as insurance." Outside, the distinctive whomp-whomp of helicopter rotors grew louder as the aircraft approached. Mercer's associate moved to secure the research materials, stuffing hard drives and documents into a backpack with frantic haste. In that critical moment, when attention divided between the approaching helicopter and the hostage situation, Luna made her move. Not the wolf herself, but the strategy she had orchestrated. The tent's rear wall suddenly ripped open as the adult bobcat, Celine, slashed through the canvas with surgical precision, creating an escape route exactly where none of the humans were watching. The distraction was momentary but sufficient. Elena reacted with trained reflexes, tackling Mercer to the ground while Tiago pulled Dr. Carey from his grasp. Chaos erupted in the confined space. Mercer's rifle discharged into the tent ceiling as he struggled with Elena. His associate turned to fire at the breached wall but hesitated at the unexpected sight of a bobcat darting through the opening. That split-second hesitation proved critical as federal agents, having fast-roped from the helicopter, stormed into the tent from multiple entry points. "Federal agents, weapons down, now!" The professional precision of the tactical team ended the confrontation in seconds. Mercer and his associate were subdued, disarmed, and secured before they could react effectively. As agents secured the scene, Tiago found himself staring at the torn tent wall where Celine had created their escape route, an action that could not possibly be coincidental. Dr. Little Wolf joined him, her expression reflecting his own wonder. "The bobcat created a diversion exactly when we needed it most," she said quietly, almost as if they understood we were in danger and developed a tactical response. Tiago finished. "But how could they know?" Dr. Carey approached, still shaken but with scientific curiosity reasserting itself. "The perimeter cameras. Luna's pack has been under observation long enough to understand the connection between the cameras and human attention. They've seen us monitoring them, responding to their movements. They used our own surveillance system against the intruders," Dr. Wilkins realized, joining the conversation, "deliberately showing themselves on multiple cameras to divide attention while Celine approached from the blind spot." Outside, the camp had been secured by federal agents. The helicopter that had arrived so opportunely now sat on the small clearing serving as a landing zone, its rotors slowly winding down. Through the torn tent wall, Tiago caught a glimpse of movement at the forest edge, a gray form slipping between trees, followed by smaller shapes moving in perfect coordination. "They're withdrawing," he noted. "Mission accomplished." Elena approached, holstering her weapon after giving her statement to the federal agents. "You all need to see this," she said, leading them outside to where agents were examining Mercer's vehicle. The trunk of Mercer's modified SUV contained a horrifying arsenal of wildlife trafficking equipment, specialized cages, sedatives calibrated for various species, surgical tools for removing tracking implants, and forged transportation documents. Most disturbing were the custom restraints clearly designed for wolves, with additional smaller sets that could only be meant for bobcats. "They came fully prepared to capture the entire pack," Elena observed grimly. But beyond the expected equipment was something far more chilling, a tablet containing detailed files on Project Prometheus, including photographs of Luna as a pup during the original experiments. Somehow, Mercer had obtained classified research data that should have been secured in university archives. "There's a leak somewhere," Dr. Carey said, her voice tight with anger and fear. "Someone with access to the original project data is working with these traffickers." As federal agents processed the scene, cataloging evidence and securing the prisoners for transport, Dr. Wilkins pulled Tiago aside. "We need to move the research operation immediately. If Mercer had this level of intelligence, others might as well." "Move where?" Tiago asked. "It would take weeks to establish another site with this level of monitoring capability." Dr. Wilkins's expression was resolute. "I've already discussed contingency plans with university administration. There's a private research preserve in Wyoming, completely secure, with existing infrastructure we can adapt. We can be operational within 72 hours. And Luna's pack? We can't exactly ask them to relocate." "That's where it gets interesting," Dr. Wilkins replied, gesturing toward Dr. Little Wolf, who was examining topographical maps with one of the federal agents. "Sandra believes the pack may follow if we create the right conditions." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The research camp was systematically dismantled, equipment carefully packed and transported to the new location under federal escort. Dr. Little Wolf worked with wildlife management experts to establish a scent corridor, a trail of familiar markers leading from Luna's territory toward the new research site 50 miles away. The strategy was based on her documentation of traditional indigenous practices for guiding wolf movements during seasonal migrations. Tiago divided his time between the relocation effort and the hospital, where Maya continued to respond remarkably well to treatment. On his third day at the new research facility, he received the news they had been waiting for. Maya's latest scans showed no detectable cancer cells. She wasn't fully recovered and would need ongoing treatment to ensure the remission held, but the most dangerous phase had passed. "When can I see the wolves?" was her first question when he shared the good news about the new research site. "Dr. Reyes says another week of observation. Then you can make day trips as long as you don't overexert yourself," Tiago replied, his heart full at seeing the healthy color in her cheeks, the brightness in her eyes that had been dimmed for so long. "Do you think Luna's pack will follow the scent markers?" Dr. Little Wolf's theory is fascinating, but we don't really know if cognitively enhanced wolves will respond to traditional guidance methods, Maya mused, sounding remarkably like the scientists she had been studying with such intensity. Tiago smiled. "That's exactly what Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Carey are debating. We've maintained the monitoring equipment at the original territory, so we'll know if they start to move." The answer came sooner than anyone expected. That very night, the tracking system registered movement. Luna's pack, traveling as a unit, had begun following the scent corridor with deliberate purpose. Most remarkably, they moved primarily at night, maintaining strict formation with the bobcats fully integrated into their travel pattern. By the time Maya was cleared for her first visit to the new research facility, the pack had established itself in the adjacent wilderness area. The preserve's natural features, a river system, varied terrain with both forest and meadowland, and abundant prey, seemed to meet with Luna's approval. The researchers had been careful to maintain distance, observing primarily through remote cameras to allow the animals to settle without human interference. The day of Maya's visit dawned clear and cool, a perfect spring morning in the Wyoming highlands. The new facility was impressive, a main research building constructed with sustainable materials that blended with the natural surroundings, surrounded by observation platforms strategically positioned to monitor wildlife without disruption. Tiago watched with pride as Maya walked confidently into the main research center, her illness not forgotten, but no longer defining her. Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Little Wolf greeted her warmly, having formed a bond through their shared fascination with Luna's pack during Maya's recovery. "Perfect timing," Dr. Wilkins told her, leading them to the main monitoring station. "Luna's group has been particularly active this morning. They appear to be teaching the bobcat cub hunting techniques along the eastern ridge. Maya's eyes widened with delight as she took in the multiple camera feeds showing the wolf pack moving through morning mist, the bobcat mother and her now growing cub fully integrated into their formation. "They're so beautiful," she breathed. "Would you like to see them more directly?" Dr. Little Wolf asked. "There's an observation blind near their current position. If we're quiet and the wind direction holds, we might get a closer look." The blind was a masterpiece of natural camouflage constructed to resemble a fallen tree cluster while providing a clear view of the meadow below. They settled inside, Maya's excitement barely contained as she adjusted the specialized binoculars Dr. Wilkins had provided. They didn't have to wait long. Luna appeared first, her silver-gray coat catching the morning light as she emerged from the tree line. She paused, head raised, testing the air for any hint of danger. Apparently satisfied, she made a soft chuffing sound that carried clearly to their position. In response, the rest of the pack emerged, 3 adult wolves, the bobcat mother with her distinctive spotted coat, and the cub, now nearly adolescent in size. They moved with the coordinated precision that had so fascinated the researchers, each animal clearly aware of its role in the group's formation. "They're hunting," Tiago whispered, recognizing the intent postures, the strategic positioning. What followed was a display of interspecies cooperation that defied conventional understanding of predator behavior. The wolf pack herded a small group of deer toward a rocky outcropping where the adult bobcat had positioned herself, using her superior climbing ability to create an ambush point. The bobcat cub, still learning, watched from a protected position, visibly absorbing the lesson in collaborative hunting. When the hunt succeeded, a clean, efficient kill of a single deer, the pack gathered to feed in a hierarchy that somehow accommodated both species' natural behaviors. Luna, as alpha, fed first, but notably shared the prime portions with the bobcat cub in a display of care that transcended species barriers. Maya watched it all with rapt attention, her expression reflecting wonder, respect, and a deep connection to the natural world that no hospital room could diminish. "They're like a family," she said softly. "Different species, but still a family." Tiago put his arm around her shoulders, overwhelmed by how close he had come to losing everything in his desperate attempt to save her. Instead, through a chain of events that began with his darkest decision, they had both found their way to this moment of grace and wonder. "Yes," he agreed simply. "A family." As they watched, Luna suddenly raised her head, looking directly toward their observation blind with uncanny accuracy. For a breathtaking moment, those intelligent amber eyes seemed to meet Tiago's across the distance, acknowledging his presence with what he could only interpret as recognition. The wolf held his gaze for several heartbeats, then deliberately turned back to her unusual pack, her chosen family, guiding them back toward the shelter of the forest with the quiet confidence that had first captured the researchers' attention. In that moment, Tiago understood something profound about the nature of intelligence, adaptation, and the boundaries between species. Luna and her pack weren't just an anomaly created by human intervention or a curiosity to be studied. They represented possibility, the potential for connection and cooperation that transcended biological imperatives in evolutionary history. "Luna freed the bobcat cub when you had it tied as bait," Maya said thoughtfully, still watching the spot where the pack had disappeared into the trees. "And now you're helping protect her pack. It's like everything came full circle, isn't it?" Tiago nodded, struck by his daughter's insight. "Sometimes the things we need most come from unexpected places, and sometimes, when we're given a second chance, we find better ways forward than we ever imagined." As they walked back to the research center, Maya's strength growing with each passing day and the wolf pack thriving in their new territory, Tiago reflected on the strange, winding path that had led them here. From desperation to redemption, from the edge of ethical compromise to the frontier of scientific discovery, from near tragedy to unexpected grace. Luna had shown mercy when faced with a helpless captive. In doing so, she had set in motion a chain of events that saved not only the bobcat cub, but in a way had saved Tiago and Maya too. It was a lesson in interconnection he would never forget, how a single act of unexpected compassion could ripple outward, changing everything in its path.